Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Students of the Word. This is session number 44, and today we come to the last sentence of paragraph 8. The good news is the paragraph is sort of internally, I think, a little bit less confusing than the last ones that we've been doing. However, on the other hand, I don't know what it's about. So, looking forward to exploring the final sentence of this confusing paragraph with you. And then we'll see if we can go back and put things together a little bit. So, here we go. That's what's going to happen this week. So, we're going to jump ahead here to paragraph 8. I'm sure we'll be glancing back at some of the earlier paragraphs as we go, but let's read the entire thing. And because it's important to remind ourselves of the terms that he's been bringing in, because in this last sentence, he's going to be coming back to something he started a bit of earlier on, as we discussed before. So, now, little children, abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink away from him in shame at his coming or from his coming. If you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone also who practices righteousness is born of him. See what kind of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we would be called children of God. And such we are. For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him just as he is. And everyone who has this hope fixed on him purifies himself just as he is pure. Okay, so this the two big concepts that we get to here in this last sentence of the paragraph are hope and purification, hope and holiness, right? And so those are the first, we need to understand these concepts. And it's interesting because neither one are concepts he's really brought up before. The word hope has never appeared in the epistle to this point. This is the first time we're getting hope, even though that's a very important concept. And purification is also, this is not something we've literally gotten. No, we'll look back at some connections. And in particular, when I was saying we were picking up on an earlier idea, you will recall when we talked about verse 29, if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone also who practices righteousness is born of him. And we were looking at John's sort of concept of righteousness, which came up first here in paragraph 2, way back when it was being connected with the cleansing, with the forgiveness of sins and of cleansing, right? The blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin. And then the parallel to that in verse 9, he is faithful and righteous to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So when we are our righteousness is discussed here in this earlier passage, it seems to be in that kind of a purification way. We are cleansed, we are purified of our sins. So I was talking about that a little bit when we talked about verse 29 and saying, I'm pretty sure we're going to come back to this later on when he comes back to the concept of purification explicitly there in the last sentence. That's where we seem to be sort of connecting back. So if we think about that connection here, if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone also who practices righteousness is born of him. So he links this idea of righteousness, right, of doing righteousness. After our unrighteousness is cleansed away, right, in his right, we're cleansed of our unrighteousness. So if we now do righteousness, that's connected to being born of him, to this amazing love that the Father has bestowed on us, that we would be called the children of God, right? Okay, so now we come back again. Everyone who has this hope fixed on him purifies himself just as he is true. All right, so let's see let's figure out what we're looking at here. All right, in the Greek we have and kai pas. Okay, we've seen this before, right? And okay, pas ho ekon, right? So if I'm correct, what we're seeing here is the same thing we saw in paragraph 7, right? Like the father and son denying ones, right? Here we have and all the having the hope in him, having this hope in him ones, right? All the having the hope in him ones purifies himself, right? Passes masculine. Okay, each of the having the hope in him ones, right? Because this is a participle, same way, right? Yeah, present participle. All or each of the having the hope in him ones, right? Okay. Each of those. So one of the things that I really like about this Greek construction that John has been using multiple times here, when we say this in English, right? Everyone who has this hope fixed on him purifies himself. In English, it kind of it's a little bit less emphatic, right? Like the English syntax says, basically everyone purifies himself, and then there's a modifier of everyone, like which, and everyone who, like which everyone who has this hope fixed on him, right? So it sort of, it gives it the primary thing is everybody, right? That's the sort of the main subject, everyone. And then it's qualified, who has this hope fixed on him. Now, I don't mean that means something. I'm not trying to say that means something different, right? But it kind of makes it secondary in a sense, if you see what I mean. Whereas in the Greek, there's no question of like everybody purifies himself. But wait, let me clarify. I mean this everybody of whom this condition is true, right? Which is how the English does it. Instead, it foregrounds the condition, right? All this conditional people, right, are the ones, right? Are the ones who purify themselves. So again, instead of making the condition merely be a kind of attached as a qualifier, by using it as a participle like this, it really again, you think back again the way that he did it in paragraph 7, right? Like who is the liar but the denying the Christ one, right? That's it's just kind of more direct, if you see what I mean, than the way we'd construct that in English, which is who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ. I just kind of like how it's all moved up directly into the sort of the subject there. All the having, right? This is all nominative right here. And that's fun. I like that. As I say, it seems to me like more direct. Yeah. So, right, Randall suggests literally each the having his hope in him one. Yes. Okay. So each of the having the, again, it's singular, so I keep wanting to make it plural because that's how the other ones were, as I recall. Each having the hope in him one purifies himself. So there's our verb. That's all the subject. Each having the hope in him one purifies himself. Just as kathos, right? Which we had kathos just in the previous sentence, right? We will see him kathos estin, just as he is, right? So kathos is the just as one, exactly like, right? So just as we will be like him, for we will see him just as he is. And now we have everyone all of the having the hope in him purifies himself, just as kathos, he is pure. That's present, right? Present indicative. Yes. Okay, great. Now, a couple things here that I want to make sure I'm understanding. I don't understand, and this is because, a frontier I've not yet really come to in wrapping my mind around Greek syntax is how articles work. I've been trying to figure it out, but it still eludes me. Anyway, so this hope, the this here, I don't get the tauten. What is the purpose of Obviously, in English, we wouldn't use both of these, right? We wouldn't use the pronoun this and the definite article the, but they do seem to use definite article rather more liberally in Greek, as far as I can tell, than we do in English. Okay, so is it right then to say everyone having this hope? Okay, right. So Randall says it's the standard Greek construction, the plus the noun plus this equals English this plus the noun. Okay, so as I've seen several other times in places where in English we drop the definite article, especially like when we do a pronoun like this instead, they don't drop the article in Greek. They keep the article. That I've been noticing that, but I don't know why. I'm trying to understand it. I can totally willing to believe that the hope this in him in Greek is the equivalent, that like 10 elpida tauten in Greek is the equivalent of this hope in English. I'm just trying to understand what it means in Greek, like without kind of just going to the equivalent English syntax. But anyway, someday I'll understand articles. But okay, but I trust you. So everyone having this hope in him. So tauten, this. This is a demonstrative pronoun. Demonstrative pronouns point. That's their job. This and that, right? This, that, these, those, like you're pointing at things, right? It's like the candy shop pronouns, right? I'll have one of these and one of those, and I'll have that and this. So what's it pointing to? You always have to ask what it's pointing to. True of all pronouns, but particularly demonstrative pronouns. So he's just talked about the future hope. And we got all this future tense stuff. We are children of God. So by the way, I don't think that being children of God is included in the hope that he's talking about, because that's present tense. We are that, right? That might be a question of belief, right? Like, do you believe it? Do you accept it? But that's not a hope issue, right? That's already present tense. Hope is a future tense deal. So he's talking about what we will be. Seems to be the this that he's pointing to. It's the future item, right? What we will be. So John, tell us more about what we will be. We know that when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. I don't think the seeing him as he is itself the item of hope that he's talking about here. I mean, that's a promise, right? We do hope in the revelation of God, right? In the coming of the Messianic age. Like it's not like that's not an object of hope, but that's something that he's been like kind of taken for granted, or sort of that's been a given, right? He's not used the word hope to talk about things like, it is the last hour, right? Like the age, the Messianic age is coming. And he hasn't used hope to talk about things like the darkness is passing and the true light already shineth, right? So I think that the future-oriented hope, because all hope is future-oriented, that he's talking about is we will be like him. That's the essence of the future, what he's pointing to in the future, right? The we will see him as he is the explanation, right? The Hoki stimulated explanation, right? The causal explanation of why we will be like him, right? How can we understand, why on earth would we be like God? Well, because we will see him as he is, he said. Which of course doesn't make it perfectly transparent, but anyway, that's given as an explanation, right? So I think this is why one of the reasons why I wanted to wait until the end last time to talk about the tenses, because it's really important for understanding the beginning of this next sentence, right? Yeah. And Randall, I agree with that. Randall says hope is a loaded word in the New Testament. I did a study on it a few years ago and found that it expresses confidence rather than optimism. Yes, exactly. More like expectation than anticipation. Absolutely. This word elpida, this is the same Greek word. This is the same word that Paul is using in Romans, right? When he's talking about, in Romans 4, when he's doing the Abraham thing, in Romans 8, all through Romans 8, when he's doing them, when he's talking about the world to come and everything, and all of the future hope that Paul talks about, really throughout Romans, he's using this word elpida. So that does seem to be the same kind of concept here. And I agree. I would even say, Randall, thinking back to those two future tense things that I was just discussing, right? The one future tense thing of us being like him, and the other, we will see him as he is, right? Both of them are in the future tense. And I was talking about how, we will see him as he is, right? Like when he's revealed, right? That's what it means for him to be phanerothed, right? For him to be revealed. The revelation of God in the Messianic age is like a given, right? Whereas the news, right, the update, right, the thing that we're being informed of here is that we will be like him. But I agree with you, Randall, that the same expectation applies to both, right? I do think that that's this hope. Tauten, that we will be like him, is the hope that he's pointing to. I think it's what Tauten is pointing at. But I agree that there is expectation involved here. I'm trying to think of examples in the all right, I'm trying to think of examples in the New Testament. Okay, so Scott, I was trying to avoid it, but I won't avoid it. That is alluding to Tolkien's words for hope. Because it's exactly the difference of what Randall and I are talking about here. Tolkien in his Elvish languages has two different Elvish words for the word hope. One is Amdir and one is Estel. Amdir means like a positive assessment of the odds of success, essentially, right? If you have Amdir, if you have like if you're playing a football game and you've got a 14-point lead going into the last 2 minutes, you have a substantial amount of Amdir that you're going to win the game, right? Even if you think you're the better team than the other team, before the game starts, you might have a lot of Amdir that you're going to win the game, right? Estel is trust. It is reliance. It is much more closely attached to faith. It is to hold fast to the positive outcome of the future, right? Really, and the way that Tolkien uses it most often is that it's basically sort of reliance that I think the purest illustration of Amdir in Tolkien's works is when Galadriel says that what she believes is that what should be shall be. That's pretty much Amdir right there. And I think that concept of hope, like that you can trust in this thing. Now the difference is that neither of Tolkien's words are sort of applied directly towards specific things, right? Towards specific outcomes, right? Like to hope that this happens. Both of them are sort of more about attitudes in general, but those attitudes do really map onto this difference between like optimism, anticipation, I think it's going to work out on the one hand, and expectation, confidence, trust on the other hand. And certainly it does seem, from the way that the word elpida is used elsewhere in the New Testament, especially by Paul, that it is that kind of trust, that kind of reliance. Trust, I think, is perfect because it really is about trust in God, trust in God's promises. So I'm thinking explicitly here of when Paul uses it in Romans chapter 4, as I say, in the Abraham context, right? That Abraham trusts God's promise and so has faith, right? Yeah. Sometimes looking forward to expresses the idea, well, yeah, sure. Yeah, so we need to come back to, if that's what he's talking about here, like if that's the sense of the word elpida that he uses. Can I say as a sidebar, I think that this word, there are a lot of like big New Testament words that, even people who know no Greek know, right, have heard, like get talked about in sermons and stuff, like agape, for instance, right? You don't have to be a Greek scholar to have heard the word agape, right? Most Christians have heard the word agape, and even things like charis, for grace potentially, and but elpida, I think, is one that gets really underplayed. I've never ever heard the Greek word elpida used in a sermon. But John says challenge accepted. There we go. I was thinking of you, John. I was trying to inspire things. The nominative is elpis. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Yeah. I was just it just struck me because when I was looking at this, I was like, that is an entirely unfamiliar Greek word to me. Like I wouldn't have picked that word out of a lineup, right? And I'm like, is that so? And my first question, I was like, is that like a weird word for hope? Is this an unusual word for hope? And then I'm like, no, that's just a normal word, and I just never heard of it before. But anyway, okay, so if that's what he's talking about there, we still have some questions that we need to figure out here. But one brief pause here. The New American Standard does a really proactive thing in this sentence, which puzzled me. Everyone who has this hope fixed on him. Fixed on him. That's so it's the app that they're working on there, I guess. I wanted to come back to that. So what's going on with the app? Is this going to be another one of those moments where I'm going to get mad at the interlinear for how it does the prepositions? Epi is on, so it's not in. Okay. On, right? N is in. That's what I thought. So, and this seems to me important. If you think of how many times that, because we've been all over that preposition in earlier paragraphs, right? Like the abiding in and to be in him and to have him in you, right? I mean, that inness concept, right, has been huge in this epistle so far. So I want to be really careful here because John is not shy about that. And that's not what he says. So it's on. It's on. The hope. He has the hope on him. Do you think that they just translated it in to make it more like English usage? Because we would usually just say hope in something, right? You don't normally have hope on things in English anyway, in English usage. So it's not that I don't understand that as a translation. Let's see. What do we get here? Let's look around. Everyone that hath his hope in him, King James does in, just as in. I'll have this hope in him, NIV. Hope in him, NRSV. Whoa. CEV is like, just makes hope the subject. This hope makes us. Wow. They're adding like a compulsion to it. Huh. Interesting. It's not out of left field. I see where they're coming from, but all right. What do I get in the message? Gosh, I love the message. Let's see. Okay. I always look for with the glisten. Yeah, no, we're just punting that entirely. Not even a reference to hope. There's the looking forward. Okay. We're just looking forward to the coming of Jesus, right? Yeah. We're all in on the second coming of Christ here, which is not alluded to in this paragraph. Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. All right. But we're not in. So in fact, the NASB, so they have a theory for what on means in this context. And their theory is that it means fixed on him, which is not bad. So they're trying to find an English construction that makes sense with the word hope and the word on, right? Okay. I mean, it's hard because they basically added an entirely new preposition, or not preposition, an entirely new participle. I mean, past participle, like a completely new verb. They've sort of thrown in there, which that's it's intrusive. But again, they're doing it better than everybody else is, so I can't complain. One of the things. Hang on a second. Okay. Because the more I think about it, the more I think that this is changing the concept of the hope that we were discussing. Everyone, each having this hope on him, one purifies himself. So the hope this is data, isn't it? Yeah, of course. No, that's exactly it. All right, so this is data. Remember, dative is like indirect object, basically, right? There are other usages too, but so it's throw him the ball, right? The ball is what you threw, but you threw it to him, right? Here you have the hope. The hope is the accusative. That's the direct object. What do you have? You have hope. You have hope on him, right? So everyone who has this hope on him. So the on him is the dative. It's like the indirect object. It tells us more about the hope, the thing that we have, right? It's not just, you don't just have to have this hope. You have to have this hope on him. Now, of course, the pronoun, the use of him, the pronoun auto here, is once more, as has been so often the case in the last two paragraphs, very hard to trace an antecedent, right? He's using the generically divine pronoun again. I mean, the last thing we got was God back in sentence 2, in paragraph 2, right? Which I guess was just last verse, but it feels like a long time ago. It's like 3 sentences ago. But given that we've been in this generic pronoun thing, like having him chuck out the pronoun auto shouldn't shock us at this point, right? Okay, so if our hope is on him, the hope that we're supposed to have, okay, the hope that this person that's being described here has, it's both this hope and it's on him. So they're the two things that we're being told about the hope, right? One, it's again, I still think this points to we will be like him, right? But it isn't just the hope that we will be like him. It's also a hope that is on him. Does that suggest that the hope is the hope of that maybe he is talking about the phanerothe, about the revelation? That if it's, hey, like, maybe the message is right, sort of, almost. Is everyone having the hope this hope on him. Yeah, interesting. Randall says epi plus the dative expresses resting on. Yeah, like resting, like sitting on top of something. Right. So if you say something like that pen is on my desk, in Greek, I would say like epi the desk, and I'd put the desk in the dative, right? So when something's like actually sitting on top of something, you would use epi and the dative. So, right? Okay. And so that's why they translate. Yes. Okay. And so that's why they translate it fixed on in the NASB. Having this hope sitting on top of God. I know it's not literal, obviously, right? But the hope rests on God, which again is, of course, exactly how Paul talks about it. I mean, just what I was just saying, right? That the kind of elpida that we're talking about, it's an expectation because it's grounded in, and not just grounded in, like it is a way of expressing trust in God's promises and in God's character. That's why you have elpida. That's why you have hope in this way, because God's said it and you know who he is and you believe him and you believe his words. Everyone having the hope in this on him. This hope on him. Right. So the two things that he's telling us about the elpida are, first, the one I'm talking about is that future thing I was just I just said that we will be like him. That's the future promise. I mean, he is also talking, as I said, about the future promise of God's revelation. But that's but that's not the sort of the centerpiece. That's the circumstance of that's the conditions under which the thing that is going to happen with us is going to be, right? Remember, which is the whole topic of the sentence, of the two sentences. Beloved, now we are children of God. We are now here, this, but it has not yet been revealed what we will be. So that's the whole subject, like what we will be, right? Esometha is the theme of those whole two sentences, right? There's what we are, children of God, sufficiently mind-blowing. But there's also what we will be, and hold on to your socks, right? Because I'm going to explain to you what we will be and how we know and how we will get there and how we can know that we will be that, right? And it turns out that what we will be is homoioi auto, like him, is what we will be. How will that happen? When will that happen? Answer to both questions. Aeon phanerothe. When he appears, hoti opsometha auton kathos estin, because when he appears, because we will see him as he is. But again, the heart of the promise, the future thing being predicted, is what we will be. And what we will be is like him. Okay, so that's this hope. That's this hope. And the hope is also, so that's first piece of information. Second piece of information is that hope is on him. That hope rests on him. And of course, you can see that in a couple different ways. Like, so if we take that positional metaphor, again, it's obviously metaphorical in that this hope is not like literally sitting on God's head, right? So it's metaphorically resting on God, right? God is the foundation of this hope. And God is the foundation of this hope in a couple different ways, right? God is the foundation of it in the sense that he is the cause of it, right? It's his appearance. It's his revelation. his phanerothe that is going to be the cause of what happens. And it also rests on him. The hope also rests on him because we trust and believe that he will be revealed and that we will see him as he is. Yes, I agree, Randall. You're right. I was just looking at that again too. There's a really neat parallel in these two sentences, right? When you look at the Greek, and it has not yet been revealed what we will be. Ti esometha. Oidamen, we know, hoti and phanerothe, that when he appears, homoioi auto esometha. Ti esometha, homoioi auto esometha. What we will be, we don't know. It has not yet been revealed what we will be. Like him, we will be, right? So he replaces the T, what? The unknown pronoun, right? The pronoun that points, the interrogative pronoun, right? That points to the uncertain. We don't know what we will be. We will be what? Who knows, right? Answer, homoioi auto esometha, right? So he does the exact parallel construction, but replaces the interrogative pronoun with the answer to the question, with the phrase homoioi auto. Yes. And yes, of course, we have the parallel emphasized by the use of phanerothe in parallel too. It has not yet been revealed. It's like a hint, right, of what the answer is. There's not yet been a phanerothe ti esometha. But we know that eon phanerothe homoioi auto esometha. Yeah. Randall John is enormously poetic. Again, his use of parallel structure like this is deep and very, very thorough. Yes. Yeah. It's very that is extremely cool. And again, it really highlights the esometha as I said, like that's the focal point, right? That's the whole that's the story of those two sentences. What will we be? Like him we will be. And that's the hope. That's this hope. And this hope is on him. It rests on God, both because it is on his promises, the promises through the prophets of his revelation, right? That God will return and the Messianic age will come. But it all, and God can be relied upon, that God is true to his promises. But it also rests on him in the sense that he will be the causal factor there, right? It's his appearance that will cause us to be like him, hoti, because since we will see him as he is. Okay, so everyone having this hope. So in the end, again, I'm coming back to the NASB. Fixed on him, I see where they came from there, but I still don't love it. Again, it's the addition of the extra verb, right? It shifts the idea of the hope. Here, they're suggesting that this, basically, if your hope is fixed on him, it's talking about the hope in the appearance, right? Like the NASB, especially given the fact that using appearance instead of revelation through verse 2, they have been suggesting, as indeed they were suggesting, I think, in verse 28 at the beginning with the shame at his coming, they've been shading in a second coming of Jesus direction from the beginning, not nearly so heavily as some of the other translations, but they've been shading in that direction, right? And so therefore, when they say everyone who has this hope fixed on him, they make it sound very clearly as if the hope in question is the hope of the second coming, right? Everybody who has their hope fixed on the second coming, everyone who has all of their hope and trust and belief focused on the the premise, right, or the prospect of Jesus's return will go on to the purification stage of the sentence, right? And that doesn't seem to me to capture what's going on here, right? I don't think it's possible. I mean, again, it's possible, but the fixed on seems to me to shift the hope to merely the hope for the appearance, when it seems to me clearer by using the this pointing back to the previous sentences, the primary focus of those two sentences is what we will be. That's the hope of what we will be. Yes, it is the hope for the eventual coming, right? For the eventual revelation of God as a sort of premise, right? But there's more to it than that. This is not just someday Jesus will come back. This is when God is revealed, this thing is going to happen. We will be something else. We will be like him. It's about our own deification, which sounds really uncomfortable to say. That's what John seems to be pointing to, and that seems to me to be this hope. I'm just based on how John has structured things here, not primarily the hope in the hope in the coming, the hope in the revelation. And yeah, I agree, Randall, that the fixed on him, to have the hope fixed on him, I suspect that they were trying to evoke the idea of fixing your eyes on something, right? Which of course is sort of natural because we just had that seeing verb at the end of the last sentence, right? We will see him as he is, right? So we have vision sort of on the brain there already. So again, that works. But again, I don't think that John is just saying, therefore we should fix our eyes on the prospect of the second coming. You know what I mean? If anything, I think that's a very significant shift of the emphasis that he is making here. Yes, the hope rests on him. Again, that's the fun thing about the combination of the this and the on him, right? Those two things that those two elements that he's added to the concept of the elpida here in this sentence is that it does both, right? The hope is in what we will be, right? But it rests on God. So like we're not just like focused, our eyes aren't just fixed on ourselves or on our, future promotion, right? It's not merely, sort of like self-aggrandizing or something like that, right? But it's also not, emphatically not, a sentence in which John is just saying, don't think about yourself, focus only on God and his second coming. He wants us very much to focus on ourselves, what we will be. That's what he's talking about here, right? This whole paragraph is about who we are, which is amazing, and who we're going to become, which is apparently more amazing, right? So, yeah. A message which draws from this merely. So forget everything else and fix your eyes on God and on your hope for the second coming. And the one who does that will purify himself just as he is pure, right? I think that's missing the point. But let's go on to the second part. Each having this hope resting on him, one, we get to the verb now, purifies himself. So here's our main verb. This is what each of the ones are doing. Each of the hope, having this hope on him one, is purifying himself, just as he is pure. What is demonstrative pronoun? What? I was going to say, I'm like, kainos? That's not he. It's a demonstrative pronoun? That one. Just as that one is pure. Right. Okay. Wish I could put asterisks on the interlinear here. Sorry, I'm growling because I'm like, look, don't make it easier. I didn't come to an interlinear to have it made easier on me, right? I came to the interlinear to help me figure out what the Greek means. Yeah, okay. Anyway, it's the same thing with the in here. If the word is not the Greek word for in, please don't put the English word in there. Anyway, okay. I get it. I understand. Trying to be helpful. Okay. Just as that one is pure. So basically, instead of using the generic masculine pronoun, he uses an even more ambiguous demonstrative pronoun, just as that ambiguously masculine divine one is pure. Got it? Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. Like, I would point out, John knows the Greek word for God, right? John also knows Jesus's name and is not afraid to talk about him, right? Nor is he going to shy away one bit from calling Jesus by his title, Christ, Messiah. So, yeah. I point this out, these obvious things, because like he could have done that. I mean, in fact, if he had said like purifies himself just as God is pure, or just as Jesus is pure, if he'd said just as Jesus is pure, it would have sounded like a reference straight back to paragraph 2, right? He is faithful and righteous to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness, right? Talking about the righteousness, the blood of Jesus' son cleanses us from all sin, right? I mean, look, Jesus' name right there, right? Associated with the cleansing of us from unrighteousness, and then his righteousness, which seems clearly to refer back to Jesus there. So again, he could just say that. But he doesn't just say that, right? John seems to be going out of his way to be vague here. And I think, in my mind, this is still going back to the father and son stuff in paragraph 7, in the last paragraph, right? That's when it all started. That's when we started getting all of these generically defined masculine singular pronouns, right? After we got the father and son stuff, he who confesses, that's right, that was the verb. He who confesses the Son has the Father also. And ever since then, it's been the generic, right? The only time he hasn't is when he's said teknotheu. And this one reference to the pater, right? What love has the Father given to us? And in both cases, the references to God and the references to the Father in the earlier on in the middle of this paragraph, it has been in the context of characterizing, like sort of fitting us into that father and son dynamic, right? Showing how that we are part of that parallel too. Just as the Father has bestowed, himself upon the Son, right? In some really important ways, right? There's this really important relationship between the pater and the huios. And that is the thing which, like, the liar denies, right? So guess what? I mean, mind-blowing news. The Father has given to us a crazy kind of love from a strange foreign country, such that we should be called children of God, All right, we get in on this whole sonship action too, because of the love of God. And again, technotheo. So both times the word God is used in this paragraph, it is in the phrase children of God to describe ourselves, right? Yeah. So, so anyway, just the point is the ambiguous pronoun continues. And again, my primary thing here is that it's like, it's related to the question that I've been pointing to, that I think that a lot of English translations oversimplify. That is the way that they oversimplify this paragraph to make it sound like it is definitely, clearly, and explicitly referring to the second coming of Christ. And again, it isn't that I am arguing that John is saying that that's not, that John is like absolutely not referring to the second coming of Christ. I'm saying that he's not making that clear. I think that he is bringing together, he is aligning the idea of the return of Christ, right, of the second coming, with the phanerothai, the revelation of God in the Messianic age, right? The tearing of the veil of the temple, the knowing as we are known, the New Jerusalem situation, right? When there is no temple and there is no darkness, and God is with us, and like no one shall need to tell his neighbor, all that stuff, right? All that stuff from the prophets and the stuff from Revelation, all those. It seems to me John is suggesting that's all one package. These things are all connected together, and we're wrapped up in them too, because we're going to get revealed at the same time, right? You see how that gets loaded in to that, right? Is when God is revealed, right? When the Messianic age comes, when the last hour is over finally and dawn has come on the new age, when God comes and it's revealed among us, is Jesus going to come back? Yeah, he sure is. Well, guess who else is coming? We're coming too. We're also going to be revealed in that same moment with God. So it's not just that Jesus' second coming and the revelation of God are a package. Our transformation is a package. It's packaged in with it also. So again, this is what I think, just coming back again to why I think it's important, or rather what this pattern of John's, I can't help but feel increasingly pointedly ambiguous pronouns are suggesting or pointing to. Okay, but anyway, yeah, Randall, that's a really useful, that's very useful to me distinction. Randall is suggesting that John is shifting to ikonos, to that one here, to the demonstrative pronoun, instead of just using auto or whatever again, him again, to differentiate this him from that him, right? Because the first himself, right, himself here purifies himself, meaning each of the having this hope on him ones, right? Each one of them, each person who has the hope is going to purify himself, right? Just as he, not the one who purifies himself, but that other one, God, right? But Randy, you see how that actually emphasizes my point, right? If John wanted to clarify, to make sure nobody got confused, that he was pointing towards God here, what would have been a really snappy way to do that? Use a noun instead of a pronoun, right? He totally could have done that. That would have been way clearer. Purifies himself just as God is pure, or just as Christ is pure, or whatever it was he wanted to say, right? But he doesn't. He sort of bends over backwards here to retain the ambiguity of the pronoun there. That one, the ambiguously divine him. That's the one I'm talking about. And I'm going to refuse point blank to use a noun, even where a noun would be, frankly, much more useful here. And again, so this seems to me like John going far out of his way not to use a clarifying noun, in which case I'm going to run with the conclusion that he has a reason for that. right? That this is not just a, a sort of a, whatever, particularly like a fluky kind of choice. He's going all the way around the block to avoid using the noun right there. Okay, and I talked about, we got kathos there again, right? Just as he is pure. So we're here comparing the purity of the having the hope one, and the purity of the ambiguously divine he, that one. Okay, let's talk about purity for a second, because I have questions. I think there seems to be an obvious thing here, an obvious connection to make. It seems to me obvious, but I am fully prepared to be told that this isn't true, or that it's a stretch, or at least that it's doubtful. But it seems to me obvious. And that is hagnos, hagnizai here, pure, purifies, connected to holy, right? The closest we've gotten to this word was hagios, right? The where was it? Down in like 20 something or other. Yeah, here it is. And you have the charisma from the Hagiu, the Holy One. Okay, so it's the link between Hagiu and Hagnos or Hagnizai that I'm wondering about. And when I look them up, it makes a lot of sense to me. This word is clearly about purification, about ritual purification, right? Right, you're gonna before the Passover to purify themselves, right? You're purifying yourselves before the Passover in John 11, right? Paul's going to take and purify himself alongside the other Jews, right? He's going to take his vow and stuff in Acts 21. And he purifies himself, right, alongside, right? We get it 3 times in this verse, this same word. James saying, purify your hearts, which is more metaphorical. Peter's saying that truth has purified your souls, which is also more metaphorical. And then we got this instance. But those first instance were clearly, it's about ritual purification. And then hagnos, similarly, is the state of being free from ritual uncleanness, right? Being clean, right? Being pure, which is associated with virginity, right? In some places. Keep yourself pure, he says to Timothy. Yeah. Right. And so when I think about the Holy One and the whole concept of holiness, this idea of being clean, of being apart from, I mean, the two ideas seem to me so obviously linked together, that to be holy is to be set apart from the unclean things of the world, right? Undefiled by any uncleanness. The entire idea of hagnizai, of purification, ritual purification, is to attempt to purify yourself even as God is pure, right? Why does the high priest have to purify himself, right, before he goes into the Holy of Holies, right? Well, because the Holy of Holies is pure, right? And the presence of the pure, holy presence of God, that's the Holy of Holies, right? The holy presence of God is there. And if you can't come into the presence of God if you're not purified, if you're not clean, right? So to make yourself, to be purified just as he is pure seems like, again, I'm thinking like the high priest here, right? So that even, going back and thinking through the Levitical law, like all of the patterns established in the Levitical law about cleansing and purification, and it's all about like, don't come into the temple unclean. Right, that's a super big deal, right? You can't just, like, you've got to do things, or you can't bring strange fire, right? We found that out on day one in the tabernacle. You can't, again, you just do, like, you can't go to the temple if you've touched a dead thing and the like, right? I mean, like, these are all, it's not, and it's clear, by the way, that like those, most of the things that make you unclean in the Levitical law, it's like, it's not wickedness, right? It's not like, a horrible sin to touch a dead thing, or like to ejaculate, or, I mean, or like to have your period, like whatever, like all those things that make you ritually unclean. They're not sinful intrinsically. I mean, there can be sinful circumstances under which you touch a dead person, certainly, but that's not what those laws are about, right? It's not like a horrible thing to be ritual unclean. The only thing that's horrible is being ritually unclean and going into the clean place, right? Or going about a clean thing. Like, you can't go in to worship God unclean, because then you're bringing the uncleanness into you're like attempting through your person to like besmirch the holiness, the cleanness of like the holy place, right? So, I mean, again, to me, these things seem clearly tied together: purification and the concept of holiness and the concept of purification. And then I see these Greek words which look really similar, right, with the Hag beginning there. And I want to say that they are very, like, that they're linked together, but it's not obvious that they're totally. All right, Randall, we can bring Proto-Indo-European to my to my defense here. There's an Indo-European root which means holy, right? Okay. All right. Right. And so, and this word, hagnizai, nizay, zay, is it zay? Z, the, zeta, epsilon, iota. Anyway, Randall was saying that that word, hagnize, is not the same word as the, like, common word for cleanse. Like, to, if you're going to wash your dishes or wash your laundry, you don't use that word, right? It's specifically about ritual purification. Okay, right. Catharizo. All right, we've gotten that one. Hey, no, wait, this is important. This is important because we had catharizo, if I am not quite mistaken. Yes, cleanse us from all unrighteousness was catharize. Yes. Yeah. And how about our sins? How about our sins back in verse 7? Catharize, yeah. Okay. Right, we were catharizoing our sins and our unrighteousness back in paragraph 2. Now, so the difference is the object, right? You wash away your sins, you wash away your unrighteousness, but you purify yourself, right? Those two things are connected, right? And this reminded me, there's probably not time for anybody to explain this to me, but let me just say, I was interested to find the reflexive pronoun himself here, because it seemed to me that the idea that we in English convey using reflexive pronouns seemed often to be conveyed in Greek with voice, especially like the middle voice. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Randall. You could just use a middle verb. That's precisely what I was thinking. I'm like, why didn't he just put it in the middle voice? So my theory then my tentative theory on my tentative was exact. Randall, you're so making me so happy today. Was exactly, does it make it more emphatic? I didn't even know, like, I didn't even remember that they had reflexive pronouns in Greek. So instead of just putting hagnizai in the middle voice, which would have in English usage basically have made it reflexive, he uses the pronoun to make it more emphatic. And what does it emphasize? Purifies himself. Okay, so here's conceptually one of the things that I'm still struggling with here. Is he saying, is this a one-step or a two-step process? That is, does having the hope purify you? Like, does the hope itself make you pure? Or does having the hope kick off the purification process, right? Right? Like, I have the hope. Since I have this hope, I'm going to make darn sure I'm going to purify myself next, right? Step one, achieve the hope. Step two, in response to having the hope, you set to purifying yourself, right? Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Randall's suggesting it would also really, the middle voice can overlap with the passive voice. So it would seem that John wants to make it really clear that he's not saying, because they might have thought if he just used the middle voice, everyone having the hope in him is purified. If that's the case, Randall, it would suggest the two-step rather than the one-step, right? Because if you've got the hope, you're pure, like the hope purifies you, QED, right? Like just, it is the having of the hope that makes you pure, like whether you like it or not, right? It's a side effect. A side effect of having the hope is purification, right? If that's what he were trying to convey, well, there isn't any point to disambiguate that, right? He would say, yeah, like, everyone having the hope in him is purified. Done. Right? So the fact that he shifts to the indicative active, so he does purifies in the active voice with the reflexive pronoun, suggests that it's a two-step process. Everybody who has this hope, that hope, the hope about what we will be, the hope that's on him, that rests on God, on the ambiguous alto. Everybody has that hope. This is what they do. They purify themselves. He purifies himself. The one who does this purifies himself. So step one, have the hope. Step two, set to purifying, right? Better get busy with the purification, just as he is pure. So just as he is pure then becomes not only a kind of standard of comparison, right? How much purification are we talking about, right? Like, is it okay to get yourself about, 65% pure? No, pure just as he is pure. That's the standard. That's the purification goal, right? To have your purity equal the purity of that ambiguously divine one. Right. So it's a present action. It goes into the future, right? In the sense that it says, like, this is what we do now, right? This is what we are currently occupied with. So that's interesting. If we see, then that suggests, again, I'm thinking about the overall shape here, right? There's a thing that is true now. We are children of God. Wow, right? Mind blown. We are children of God. And it will be revealed that we will be something else. When God is revealed, we will be like him. So there's what is true of us now, there's what will be true of us later. And if we have that hope that rests on God, the hope about what we will be, if we have that hope in us now, then what we will do in the present tense, what we will do right now, is purify ourselves, just as he is pure. And yeah, you're right, Susan. It links way back to several things earlier on, right? If I go back all the way down, can't wait to get to paragraph 9 just so I can stop doing this. Okay. If you know that he is righteous, you know that also that everyone doing the righteousness of him has been begotten of him. How can you show who are the children of God? Right, this is before his little aside when he's like, time out. Do you realize we are children of God? I mean, holy cow, right? But before he does that, he talks about it's the people doing the righteousness of him. Right? The people, if you know that he, the generically divine one, if you know that God is righteous, you know that everybody doing righteousness is begotten of him. So once we have the which is like the cleansing, right? Like that purity, that righteousness, that being in a right state, being in the state of everything being where it should be, right? The chaos. You got to be doing the righteousness. So he's coming back to doing the righteousness. This idea of purifying yourself. He is connecting with this idea of doing the righteousness, just as he is righteous. Do the righteousness just as he is righteous. He does righteousness. You do the same kind of righteousness, right? And because like that shows that you're begotten of him. And if you have the hope, not just that you are born of him, but of what you will be like him, then you're going to purify yourself just as he is pure. So both the action of purification, the doing righteousness, and the comparative link. Purifies just as he is pure, practice righteous, just as you know that he is righteous. And then, Susan, just as you say, in the middle, between those two things, well, no, before, about having boldness and not being ashamed before him in his coming, in his presence. I need more asterisks. An asterisk there. I need an asterisk there. And I need an asterisk here. Okay. Right. So, okay. Yes. Abide in him so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink away from him in shame in his presence, in his physical presence. That when he appears, oh wait, I need it there too, don't I? Yeah, I do. So many asterisks in this paragraph. This paragraph is a challenge. Okay. When he is revealed, we may have confidence and not shrink away from him in shame in his presence. Yes. Okay. But anyway, the point is, Susan, you're exactly right. Right. Purifying himself just as he is pure is just like that. Right. Notice the circularity of it. Abide in him so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink away from him in shame. So that when he is revealed, we may have confidence and not shrink away from him in shame in his presence. Okay, well, So what does that look like? What would give us confidence so that we don't shrink away from him in shame in his presence? What would give us confidence to stand boldly before the physical appearance of God at his revelation? Well, if we're born of him, if we're practicing righteousness, and what's going to happen at his coming, at his appearance, when at his phanerothe, in his presence, we're going to be like, we're going to see him as he is, and we're going to be like him. That's what's going to happen. That's what it looks like. That's what having confidence, that's what standing boldly before God in his presence is going to look like. We're going to stand boldly in his presence because we're going to be like him. We're going to be transformed. But there's a prerequisite for that, right? There's a prerequisite for that. We have to purify ourselves just as he is pure, right? We better, if you have that hope, if you trust in this vision, right? This vision that John is describing for us here of being like God, being transformed by seeing him as he is. Again, we remember Moses' partial transformation, right? We remember Jesus being transfigured and glowing on the mountaintop. We remember Moses glowing when he saw only a bit, right, of God. When we see God as he is, when it is fully revealed to us, and we don't get blasted to atoms, as people like Isaiah rather expect when they suddenly find themselves even in a vision or in a dream in the presence of God, we're going to be transformed. We're going to be transformed. We're going to be like him. So let's make with the purifying of ourselves just as he is pure. That's how we'll get. But wait, how can we do that? How do we go about purifying ourselves? Well, remember where we started? Now, little children, abide in him. Abide in him. We get those two hints about how this is possible, right? You know, his return to our actions there, our purification of ourselves, is not a turn away from God or like an insistence that we need to, that we need to, by our own actions, make ourselves just like God, like to become gods by purifying ourselves so thoroughly that we become holy like the divine one himself, right? It's not that. We start with God in us in the first place. That's why. We start with being born of him in the first place, having our origins in him, and being called the children of God. The whole thing is sort of circular, right? It circles back on itself. It started with abide in him. That oneness that we have, that inness, right, of God in us and us in God. And it's going to result in us standing before God boldly, seeing him as he is and being like him. And in the light of all of this, of all of these deep, deep connections, we have been anointed by God. The Holy One has poured out his anointing upon us. We have been born of him. He abides in us, and we abide in him. And in the future, and so thus we are called children of God. And it's gonna get even more profound. When he is revealed, the thing will be completed. It will be perfected. We won't just be joined to God, we will be like God. But that doesn't mean there's nothing for us to do. There is. We got to do righteousness. We have to purify ourselves. Yeah, exactly. Susan says, why would you do anything but get ready for that? Exactly. Exactly. It seems here that we're beginning to get more directly at the answer to the question we've been asking for 44 sessions now, right? So, you believe in Jesus. Now what? Now what? What do you do now? Right? What's the Christian life about? We seem to be getting towards there, right? Okay. All right. This, and Randall, I want to come back to the point that you were making about verb tense here to remember. This is one of the points of having the aorist tense in Greek. One of the points of the aorist tense, which we don't have, is to differentiate between the aorist tense talks about a thing that's an event, like a one-shot verb occurrence, and an ongoing action, right? So something that is just indicative active in Greek by default tends to refer to an ongoing action. It's a thing that happens, right? Purifies himself just as he is pure. It's what you do, right? It's not like a thing that happened. It's not in the aorist tense. It's not an event, right? Which again, Randall, that seems to me to underscore the conclusion that we were drawing before, right? If the entrance of this hope into your heart purified you, that would be an aorist tense kind of purification, right? Like, boom, you're pure now. But this is not a boom, you're pure now kind of verb, right? This is a thing that you do. This is an everyday present tense condition. This is your job, right? Purify yourself. Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's, the more we think about this and the more we consider how all these things work, the more clear it seems that it's a two-step process. You have the hope, and then if you have that hope, boy, you get to purifying, right? Just as he is pure. And you don't stop the purifying until you are as pure as God himself is, which is only fitting, as you shall someday stand before him in his presence, just like the high priest stood before him in his presence, except more, right? Just as Moses stood before him in his presence, except more, right? And you will be standing in the presence of the pure, the Holy One. And so if, the Levitical code teaches you anything, one of the things it should definitely teach you is you should want to be yourself clean, to clean yourself, right? To wash yourself, to purify yourself before you get there, right? That's what would cause shame, Susan, exactly as you said, right? That's why you would shrink away in shame, because you're dirty, right? Not because you're not accepted, not because not because you're not really a child, exactly, right? Because you're dirty, you're ashamed. Yeah. Sneak peek. The next paragraph, paragraph 9, John is going to be talking about sin. We are now prepared for some of the least popular verses in all of the epistle of First John. Some of the sentences that make this epistle most confusing, and I think very unpopular, like why I just don't hear people teaching on First John all that much, or when they do, they kind of pick and choose, because some of the sentences he's going to deliver in paragraph 9 are going to be a bit uncomfortable. But he's set us up for it with this talk about purification. Okay. All right. Well, as usual, thank you guys so much for helping me to understand this. And I hope you understand, like, I'm being completely honest about this. As I said from the very beginning, you'll recall in the very first session of this Bible study, I said that I chose the first epistle of John as the text for us to go through together because I didn't understand it, right? Because there's so much about it I didn't understand. And I know for me, I mean, it is a peculiarity of my own sense, my own self, and my own learning that I learn best when I'm teaching. There is no way I would have gotten a fraction as much out of studying this verse today if I hadn't been studying it with you. So thank you guys so much for helping me to, and not to mention, of course, merely the quite simple fact that those of you who are here with me live are genuinely instructing me, especially in the Greek stuff. But so this is a marvelous privilege for me, a marvelous blessing for me to learn more and to see things so much more clearly as we go through together. And it just strikes me as a really special gift from God that if my learning about this stuff also helps you guys to learn about this stuff too, that is just a delightful perk of this whole thing. So thank you so much for coming on this journey with me again, as always. All right, on to paragraph 9 next time. Really, really exciting and really challenging stuff. So thanks, everybody, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye now.